Well, first off, I want to say, we're back. And by back, I mean, I gotta get into it just a tiny little bit. I'm not gonna bore you with the backstory or anything like that, or what was going on with me. Just that it was some health issues that needed a long time to figure out and get fixed. But we are back, and this time, I'm gonna put it straight. I can't do it constantly. I can't be putting out videos all the time between work, home, and bills and all that. I may even have to monetize the channel at some point. Now, I know a bunch of you probably gonna say, why? Not like that, but I do have to kind of put the food on the table. But I will consistently put out videos when they're done. As in, when I can get done with them, they're gonna go right out to you guys. So I just want to let you know that it's not gonna be a bi-weekly or 2 weeks or a 1 week thing. It's just going to be, I'll get them out when I can get them out. Other than that, thank you for sticking around for almost an entire year. All of you are awesome. But, hey, just letting you know, I'm back, we're back, and the stories are gonna pick up again. So, thank you guys for waiting for so long, thinking it was a dead channel and all that, but glad to be back, and let's get you onto the video now. When it comes to the very wide world of cryptid sightings, there's not a shortage of the strange, the weird, and the bizarre. Every day, people all around the world report seeing creatures, monsters, and beings they can't explain and we can't identify. You've got your Bigfoots, or bigfeet? Is it Bigfoots or bigfeet? Your Loch Ness monsters, your chupacabras, and your Mongolian deathworms. They all have one thing in common, though: consistency of sighting reports. There seems to be no shortage of sightings of these cryptids and others. But then there are the quote-unquote one-offs. Singular sightings or events that happen once and never seem to happen again. The first of these one-shot cases comes from southern New York State in the town of Sherman. Sometime in the 1960s, a 15-year-old boy who remains nameless and unidentified had what I would call a very strange, albeit brief, encounter. Living on rural property that bordered some swampland, he reported that two giant sloth-like creatures with white fur came out of the swamps to lumber around their property quite often before they would amble back into the swamps and marshes they came from. The boy spoke of these creatures. "I saw a white monster in a swamp beside our house. I've been seeing these things ever since then and close to our house. One night it came down in our yard. It stands between 12 and 18 feet high. It has a long tail between 6 and 8 feet long. It's all covered with hair. They're always white. I've seen them alone or two at a time. It can walk on 2 feet or 4 feet. It's almost a double for a prehistoric sloth. My whole family has seen this thing, and I know of 2 more men who've seen them too. I'm not kidding. I've seen these things, and they are real." This particular pair of creatures were sadly described in a very small segment in John Keel's The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. The same John Keel, of Mothman Prophecies fame, and not much else is known about the encounter. It originally came in the form of a letter Keel received from the witness, which eventually was washed away by more noticeable cryptid accounts and stories. It was so brief, in fact, that it begs the question of why did Keel even add it at all? He must have thought it was important enough, though, to include, or else it would have been lost forever to the Fortean pile of unseen and unspoken reports. Now we're only left to speculate what the beasts of Sherman could have been. Giant sloths? A child's overactive imagination? We just won't know. Our second tale is more of a saga. Reporter Robert Cockrell from the Grafton Sentinel was driving home on his way from the office at 11 p.m. on June 16, 1964. He took the same way he always does, only this time the drive would be a little more paranormal for him. As he drove around a corner, he saw in his headlights what he'd thought was a big boulder at first, on the right side of the road leaning into a clearing. He'd travel that road every day and knew that this was off, but it took him a few moments to realize it wasn't a boulder, but something alive. As he slowed down to observe the animal, its size was the first thing he picked up on. He estimated it to be about 7 to 9 feet tall and was very muscular and broad. He could not see a head or a face, but that it was covered from head to toe in jet black fur that looked slick, almost greasy, like seal fur. The thing suddenly moved, and Robert then floored it to speed away, barely processing what he had just seen. Upon arriving home, he called up some friends and told them what he saw, and mentioned that they should all go out and look for it. They all armed themselves and returned to the location of the sighting and discovered nothing but matted down grass, and that's about it. They spread out and searched more with flashlights and guns at the ready when they heard what was later described as a eerie whistling sound. They claimed that the sound followed them as they looked for its source and was creeped out enough that they left because of it. Cockrell didn't immediately write up an article on his sighting and subsequent search for a few days, wondering if he should even tell anybody else about it. But he eventually wrote up a small article and published it in his newspaper. He didn't think many would even pay attention to his unbelievable tale, or they'd just chalk it up to an overactive imagination, but as soon as the ink hit the streets, to his surprise, the town went nuts. When word of his sighting got out, mobs of people swarmed the town to look for the Grafton monster. Mostly armed groups of rowdy men, but there wasn't an age restriction on monster hunting. People from all age groups began raiding the town's woods, armed with knives, crowbars, bats, pistols, and even pitchforks. It was chaos for the town, and many of these would-be monster hunters would claim to have sightings of their own. You could even hear the echoes of some firing wildly, coming from the wooded areas as well. A June 19, 1964 article of the Grafton Sentinel said of all this chaos, "Grafton's alleged monster, reportedly the personification of the active imaginations of a number of teenagers, couldn't have shown up in the Riverside Drive area if it wanted to on a Thursday night. Too many teenagers and adults were roaming that section of the city. At approximately 10 p.m., it was reported that cars were almost bumper to bumper along the River Drive, and a large number of cars were pulled off the road to permit joining in the area's most popular event in recent years, monster hunting. Some 20 reports from persons allegedly seeing the monster have been quoted since Tuesday night, when the all-white creature without a discernible head was reported seen near the city rock quarry. Wednesday night, about 30 teenagers engaged in a monster hunt, but by Thursday night, the number of teenagers had doubled and a number of adults joined in the action." For a while, the town was gripped in monster fever, with police having to go around trying to disperse the crowds. Cockrell went about interviewing others who claimed to have seen the monster, and all had similar to exact descriptions. It was 8 to 10 feet tall, broad-shouldered, covered with slick, hairless skin that was white or light gray in color, and the head either being non-existent or very small and tucked into the body. One witness who claimed to see the creature more than once said, "I have seen the creature called the Grafton Monster several times when I was a young man, and it is very real. My first encounter, I was with my father cutting wood. We'd finished and we were loading the truck when our 2 dogs started barking. We stood there and listened. Something was walking, getting closer. My dad told me to get the gun from the cab. He carried a double-barrel 10-gauge with buckshot. Whatever it was, it picked up its pace and continued towards us. All we knew for sure was it was big, and it wasn't scared of us, the dogs, or the chainsaws. It stopped about 50 to 55 yards from us in the trees and went quiet. My dad pulled both hammers back and stood in front of me, told me to be ready. The next thing that happened, I'll never forget. It stepped out, looked at us, took 3 strides in our direction, turned, and walked back into the tree line. That was my first sighting of the beast, and I'll never forget it. My second encounter was about 2 months later at night, fishing alone. I spotted him on the opposite bank, and I got the hell out of the area. Police went on to open up their own investigation into the creature and found no evidence whatsoever of the beast that stalked the woodlands. They eventually chalked it up to over-imagination and pranks. They even went as far as to say a cockerel sighting had been sparked by the misidentification of nothing more than a person pushing a handcart piled high with boxes. However, Cockrell insisted that his story was true, and he reached out to UFO researcher Gray Barker. After speaking with Cockrell and investigating the area himself, Barker came to the conclusion that Cockrell was not only telling the truth, but that it was all even stranger than it already seemed. He found that not only had various people been seeing this creature since before Cockrell had his encounter, but that many of the sightings that came in also mentioned UFO phenomena in close proximity to the incident. One such sighting sent read, "I saw the monster near the river early in the morning. It saw me and instantly froze. It didn't move. I was fishing at the time and left all my gear there and started to run away. As I ran and turned, I saw that it too turned away and started running off. As I got near my truck and began opening the door, I heard a whooshing sound and a bright light appeared above the tree line. I drove off and got my gear 2 days later." Barker was convinced that the Grafton monster and the UFO sightings were connected, and even wrote an article about it that sadly never made it to print. Another strange facet to this case is that years later, Cockrell himself would suddenly and inexplicably recant his entire original report, despite the fact that he had, until then, always remained adamant that it was all true and that he knew what he had seen. This unpublished article and the sudden recant have led the whole story further into the bizarre by sparking theories that the two had been intimidated into brushing it all away in an effort to erase the incident from history. Whatever you make of stories like these, there's certainly an abundance of them from almost every state and beyond. Creatures seen and described that only appear once, then slink away into the realm of strange Forteana, never to be seen again. One thing's for certain though, where there are sightings, there are always good stories to accompany them. Hey everybody, if you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Unknown Files here on Unknown Territory. And most importantly, thanks for watching.